you don't get to say what I mean by my words. Man, if people could just wrap their minds around that, but that requires a level of humility from the receiving person to be able to hear that how they perceived what they heard was not the way it was intended. That is a challenge for people. But you're absolutely right.
You don't get to say what I mean by my words?
You don't get to say what I mean by my words.
And we can trunk that.
We can now I may hear what you say and then communicate contradicting actions to you to convey, hey, your actions aren't following your words. But you're absolutely right when you talk about what you say your words are. That's true. Yeah.
That's a critical distinction.
Yep.
Your actions mean things to all sorts of people, and you don't get to decide that, they do.
Exactly.
But words mean what you decide they mean.
Yeah, and it's so critical because if people can receive that part in a humble way, and then the other person can receive the actions part in a humble way, that's how you find improvement, right? Because if I tell you, Tom, I'm telling you, what I meant by that was, not such a dick way of saying it. And you say, oh, right on. Well, hey, by the way, the reason I thought it was dickish was because you haven't fucking called me back at the time we had a scheduled appointment for last week. So I thought you were being a dick about that also. I'm like, holy shit, you're right. I really want to be doing this. So I should be on here. Now I understand why it could be perceived that I'm, being a dick in some manner, right? So this is how progress gets made, by that kind of an exchange where Tom doesn't try to take my words and make them something else, but instead uses actions.
Yeah. And a lot of the strife starts that way. A lot of manipulation games start that way. When someone takes your words and says, well, so what you're really saying is, no, I'm not saying that. I said what I said. Here's the problem with this distinction. So I decide what my words mean, but other people can decide what my actions mean, right?
Yeah. Well, they can communicate, what those actions conveyed to them. Correct. Well, so actions speak a message, words speak a message. The objective in any person is to have their words and their actions tell the closest story in alignment as possible. It's never going to be perfectly aligned, but you want to get as close as possible. And basically, if your actions and words are contradicting each other, that's when you have issue. And oftentimes those who have those issues, the actions and words contradiction, those are the people who are projecting a lot of times what other people mean by their words.
Well, there's a funny thing you described there, because one of the critical pieces of our minds is a reification about our own selves. So flying this flag, is that a word or is that an action?
Yeah, I mean, it is a symbol of, I would not say, look, the action for me is for me, an action is something that is over towards something or someone else. If I'm wearing or flying something that I'm feeling representative of myself for, and I tell you what I mean it as, and I'm not trying to light a person's house on fire with the flag as that, then that's what it is. And ultimately, if I don't want to be around a person who's going to fly that flag, I have to leave. They're allowed to make their statement. They're allowed to say how they feel.
Right. That's why when you put a flag up, like this is where you get in that murky area. Like, that's why we talk about freedom of expression, not just freedom of speech.
Correct.
Right? You have a right to put up.
This is a great
dance numbers and decor of your choice.
This is a great, actually, because this was a debate I had in this conservative group with the conservative Republican who said I can make an argument both ways, but he was going to lean on the side of a criminal conviction being okay for a flag burning. And I said, look, if you're going to burn the flag in protest, that's not criminal. If you're going to burn the flag to light someone else's house on fire, that's fucking criminal. And basically, that action behind it, right? If you're burning it as a statement, as an expression in a controlled area that's not, that's not going to be hurting or intentionally trying to cause harm to others and doesn't cause harm to others, no foul. But the fallacy comes in when people try to make it mean something it doesn't.
And it always seems to me that it should be legal to burn your own flag.
You should be able to burn anything you buy so long as it doesn't cause, it's not intended to hurt someone and doesn't hurt someone.
But then, we're back again to this statement. Is the statement, isn't it? All right, I think we killed the subject today. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it sounds. Yeah, I think the only thing I would say might be nice in not a full hour follow up, but in a quick follow up, get some questions from people on reification error, and maybe answer some of those questions. And then on top of that, I think it would be beneficial to go over, common errors that happen on a daily basis in these political chat rooms one time. Because, the flag's one instance that comes up, but every single day you have constant reification errors occurring with partisanship. And so basically, really parties have learned how to apply this, I would call it the dog at the corner of the fence mentality by using reification errors. They pin you in like a dog, and then they say you have to agree with all of these policies, and if you disagree with one, you're no longer in the party. That's a massive social engineering by reification error. So effectively, what's that?
That is a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you have one characteristic, you have them all.
Exactly. If you have one, you have them all, and if you don't have one, you have none. Right?
Let's finish up with an example on a really vague word, own. When you own something, what's that really mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to mean it's yours, but I still pay taxes on things I'm supposed to own outright, right? So
hold on. Well, so there's one thing. If you don't have to pay on it, in other words, is there some debt on it? When we talk about ownership, it's a really vague kind of thing because it's actually a bunch of different powers, and very often people will mix those all up without making them explicit. So if you're talking about buying like a piece of real estate, does that mean I own the airspace? Well, not really, because there's the tower control area from the airport, right?
You don't even own your easements.
That's right, and there's all these powers. Can I exclude somebody from it? Can I use it? Can I destroy it? Can I sell it? And very often people will mix these up. They'll say, well, if I have one of these powers, I have all the powers. And kind of like what you're saying when people say, well, if you do this one behavior,
oh yeah, exactly, yeah,
matches my enemies, you must have them all.
Yeah, if you do one behavior, then you have them all. If you don't do one, if you don't do one, then you have none. So in other words, if you're a liberal who is also pro-life, you're no longer liberal. And if you're a conservative who is also in favor of, decriminalization and different social programs based on anything disproportionate, then you're no longer conservative. So in other words, if you're missing one piece, you have no pieces, and if you have one piece, you have them all. You see how contradictory that is on a substantive level? So and it makes no sense either direction, because theoretically, if you have one, you have them all, but if you don't have one, you have none. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but you get what I'm saying?
Well, that's why I like premises over isms. When people start talking about, oh, you're an ismist, you're a this or that ist. Oh, you're into what you call ism. Like whenever people start throwing that word ism or ist onto the back of a word, they're really just making a reification error so they can create this nebulous accusation. So they check off some particular behavior, right? So we have some feature, and that establishes, oh, you're one of those guys, and now I can go moralize at you.
I mean, the MAGA hat's a great example of that, right? I mean, people, if you're wearing a MAGA hat, this is a great example. Imagine having a conversation. This is something I like to do with people. It's an exercise. Imagine you're a liberal who's having a conversation. You just played a really awesome game at the YMCA. Why not basketball? And you guys have had a great game. You're on the same team. You were clicking the whole time, passing the whole bit. You guys were on it, high fives, fist bumps, the whole bit. You guys are laughing it up. You can grab a fucking beer afterward. And then when you're walking out from the restaurant, he goes in his bag and puts a fucking MAGA hat on. And you just clock the guy, right? Now, I'm not saying that this is a hypothetical situation, but it's honestly not that far off from what actually happens. The only thing that doesn't happen is the basketball game before. In other words, these people, and it's not just in MAGA hats, it's in any kind of associative fallacy, but basically, these people wouldn't be hit or touched by the person who assaults them if not for that one MAGA hat. And it's quite likely they might actually click on different levels, but they get blinded by this one fallacy notion of that one hat symbol and how they perceive it and what they perceive it to mean. Go ahead. Experience.
No, I'm just keeping track of it's almost like a two-part thing too.
Yeah.
First you establish the category, and now once I've decided you're one of these kind of guys, then I can do this and that other thing.
Antifa, punch Nazis, right? Or punch fascists. That's what it is. Antifa. We will silence fascists with violence, right? And somehow they don't see that that's fascism.
That's exactly it, man. They make this sort of leap in the second level here. You must be a fash. You got the haircut. You got, I don't know, maybe you own a business or whatever ridiculous. And that's the issue here, isn't it? We see this a lot in the group, and a lot of times the question is, what's the criteria? You made that judgment based on what? Where did that come from, man? All right, so let me just describe. Let's finish up by talking about one more weird reification. When I talk about you, when you think about yourself, what does that mean?
Wow. Yeah.
And here's the crazy part. There's at least, you mentioned this earlier about
the tree
aligning your head and creating deception. And there's the names I heard for them are the metaphor me and the analog I. One of these, the metaphor me, is how other people see me. And the analog I is how I know myself to be.
Yeah.
So when you talk about deception is when you deliberately make these different. And that's one of the reasons that liars often get caught, because all of a sudden, if they start a lie, I have to tell this other lie for Joey.
Yeah, that's where they don't keep it up anymore.
This other lie for Sam, and they know what the real story is from their point of view. But after a while, instead of having to keep track of one reality with an image of themselves in it,
that's exactly right. Yeah,
they have to keep track of 1, 2, 3. Every new guy that comes along has a whole. I mean, after a while, you overload. And this is one of the things that we see when you get into discussions. And I first learned about this. I first really saw this working in the pawn shop. And if you ever watch the show Columbo, Columbo teaches you how to do it. Just keep following up those loose ends, man. It doesn't quite add up. And
this is where
if I keep picking at it, this is going to crack.
Narcissists will frequently, when this is going on with multiple lies and narcissists, and you are picking at the loose ends, a tactic you'll get hit with a lot is they'll say, "Why are you interrogating me?" Or and a supreme narcissist will say, "No one's going to want to hang out with you or talk with you if you're always, interrogating people like this." They'll do that. Those are two very common tactics of narcissists in this exact situation, because what they've done, and what you're doing oftentimes, and I'll speak from my own experience, what I'm doing oftentimes is trying to understand better what the actual truth is, because there's things that don't add up. And during this fact-finding mission. There's no judgment being made, but because the person knows they're lying, they are judging themselves. And so to avoid having to actually deal with that reality, they try to make it where it's like, why are you interrogating me? And of course, it's one of those funny things, because if you ever find yourself in that situation, what is an interrogation usually used for?
To learn the truth.
So it's one of those really fun things where once you pick up on this situation, you're actually not ever interrogating someone. You're actually, because you're not a police officer, believe it or not. What you're doing is you're just asking the logical questions to try to figure out why these inconsistencies exist. But because the other person has the metaphor Sam and the metaphor Joey going on at the same time, along with metaphor me, they can't keep it straight in their head. They feel like they're being interrogated by multiple different police officers.
Sure. So you know what a lot of people do to save space?
Blow it up, probably.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh. They lose their analog eye.
Oh, shit. Now I see what you were doing that whole time. He wasn't just closing it out for us. Wow. So,
when we talk about the diminished consciousness of some of these broken people, it's because they get overloaded trying to keep track of all the lies. And one option, one strategic move, is to not have a truth. Yeah, basically have the truth be whatever it needs to be in any certain situation, right? Is what they do. That's right. So I don't bother to keep track of what right. What's the real reality? And you'll hear people say that they'll give themselves away with that. They'll come back with this postmodernism. Some people say that the postmodern nihilism is popular because it allows people to sort of get away from, when you talk about alienation, right?
Yeah.
There's an idea from Nietzsche and Sam Beckett and some of the other existentialists.
For anyone, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just connecting that same idea to other historical.
Well, for anyone who comes across that exact state, what was that one? Not before alienation. What did you just say? What was the other pocket phrase you have scribbled out?
Real
now?
Reality.
Yeah, the real reality conversation. So this is just, I think, another good benefit for these discussions is giving tips to people who want to go out there and try to have real discussions in the reality that is real and does exist. And so I'm going to give a tip to that because I get that a lot from those crazy people. Well, not crazy, just misinformed, broken. But basically, the answer to that, in my opinion, is pretty simple. We have to come to an agreement on what reality is. So, yeah, there's a real reality. We got to come to an agreement on it. And then you say, what is it? And you shut up. And you let that person answer it. And then
that's kind of like the ultimate reification error for communication. There's an idea in someone's head. If you want to find out what it is, you actually got to listen and help them make their words clear so you can know what they're really talking about.
And what you'll find when you do that, exactly, that technique is oftentimes they've been so manipulated themselves, by themselves or by others, whatever the case may be, that they haven't thought it through. And when you challenge them to think it through, it actually helps them get out of what I would call a mental prison of these false realities that are hindering their success or potential success, and allows them to come to at least a little bit closer to what the objective reality is.
The ideas in other people's heads really exist. Always.
That goes back to this will cap it off to the full circle. That goes back to the robber outside that ended up being a broken flower pot that we started this whole thing with 2 or 3 weeks ago. Basically, if I'm dead asleep and I hear something outside and I swear it's a burglar, it's a robber, I could grab a gun, call the police, check on the kids' room, make sure all the doors are locked. I could call my family. Oh man, someone tried to break in tonight. I mean, I could do all these panic type moves. I could do all these different things. The police could even come over and not see the pot. We file a police report, all of it. But the reality is, it was a fucking flower pot the entire time. But that objective reality does not change the dual reality that at the same time it was a flower pot, I was also certain it was a robber, enough to call the police, enough to file a police report, right? So if I'm unwilling to look at the flower pot and objectively, look at myself and say, hey, maybe I panicked here, and this flower pot wasn't like this when I went to bed, and that looks like something that could break and make the noise I heard. If I'm unwilling to do that, I never find the objective reality. And that's where I think people get stuck.
Well, what you're describing is when the event happens and there's no cause, or when the idea exists and there's no reality for it. That's different. That should probably be another time.
Nice. Yeah, exactly. I guess we've gone an hour and 15 now, so we can cap it off. But yeah, we'll do maybe, you text me, we'll talk about next. In fact, how about this? We have some people who are popping up more regularly now. How about they email over a topic and we decide off of, like, if Renee, Dan, Dan number 2, Dan Rice, you're Dan number 2, by the way. Sorry, you were second here. For the rest of eternity, you're Dan number 2, Reification heirs. And then, so if anyone wants to send over some topics, message Tom or Creep or me or whoever, we can kind of filter through those and do something that they choose next Friday. How do you think of that?
That sounds great.
Cool. And then, I'll message you. We'll get together and knock it out. I'll message you about tomorrow here later. So sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.